Formally introduce myself, I'm Arlin Pound. I'm NSS 8521. This will be 60 years that I've been an NSS member. I'm at my age, I'm not near as active as I was in caving years past. I still have an extreme interest in it and try to keep up on what's going on. I have caving friends all over the place, and so I really enjoy coming to convention and seeing people, some of which I've just met and some of which I've known over 50 years. Caving first or music first?
Either or.
How they tie together. I was raised mostly on a Kansas wheat farm. My dad and mother were both raised in an area where there were a number of gypsum caves, and so I was taken to one fairly well-known small cave when I was probably 5 years old. I loved the feeling of exploring, but I didn't really know anything about proper technique or anything. Also, my dad played tenor banjo, and I thought my grandfather had actually played guitar with like a gospel group in Illinois when he was a young man. And so the music interest was there, and I was drawn to, back in those days, guitar and banjo, and discovered the dulcimer a little bit later. When I went to college, my roommate overheard another one of the students talking about a cave nearby, and I realized that, and this was Chuck Van Arsdale, who at that time had already been an NSS member for several years, and had sort of started an unofficial survey of Kansas caves. I immediately ran down to his room, pounded on the door and said, "I hear you know something about caves in Kansas." And I only knew of a few, and he had records of 40 or 50, and I was surprised. Of course, we have many times more than that now. But that same year, this would have been the school year 63-64. I was a freshman in college in Winfield, Kansas, and my brother had been given a guitar, or just a cheap acoustic guitar for Christmas, and he never played it, but there were people in the dorm playing, so I appropriated the guitar and started learning, some of the basic chords and techniques. And about 2 months later, I got introduced to real caving, learning, a little bit of a conservation ethics and equipment you should have and things like that. And then a year later, in the summer of 1965, I joined the NSS. I went to my first convention in 1966 at Sequoia National Park in California. The musical interest came when I started listening to recordings, and I realized there was more instruments than guitars and banjos and mandolins. And I must have read of or heard a Jean Ritchie recording, who was from Kentucky. She was one of the first popularizers of the mountain dulcimer in the American folk scene. And I wanted a dulcimer. I didn't get my hands on one until a few years later, again in Winfield, Kansas. the wife of the physics teacher at the college had a mountain dulcimer, and so I got to experiment with it a little bit, and then finally bought one about 3 years later in Tucson when I was living in Arizona. And it took me longer to learn more than the simple, melody and strum lines. I actually learned, this may have some caving relevance, Ted Petronoff, an old Indiana caver, and his then wife Margie lived a few blocks from me in Tucson, and I used to visit, and they had a friend named Tom Elliott who played dulcimer, and he showed me some of the basic chords for this tuning on the dulcimer. And so the connections to caving and the music I play sort of evolved simultaneously almost. And I'm currently a member of of course, an NSS member, and a member of, I'm vice chair of the Kansas Speleological Society, which is an NSS grotto. I'm also a member of Northern Arizona Grotto, and I'm sort of a de facto member of Armpit Grotto in Wyoming, which is sort of inactive these days, but is I think stays chartered as a grotto. I've been a member of probably, a number of other grottos at times, and also a member of the Great Plains Dulcimer Alliance in Wichita, Kansas, where I live. I live about 70 miles from there, and that's one of the closest groups of people that I play music with. And that's probably enough about me. Except I'm getting old. I'll be 80 this fall.
Let's play some music.
Okay, this is, I'll play something simple to start with. This is in what's called the Mixolydian or DAD tuning, which is one of the more versatile tunings. The bass string is tuned to a low D. The middle string is tuned to A, which is the fifth. It fits with the drone for that key. And the melody string, or in this case double melody strings, are tuned to an octave higher D. So it sounds like that. And the common way, the first way most people learn to play is to play melody on the high string or string. Some people use a single string, and drone against the bass string. So you get something like. And often people, one of the first things they learn is the old tune, Go Tell Aunt Rhody, which sounds something like this. And that was one of the simpler ones, and then you can advance to faster or more complex fiddle tunes, things like Old Joe Clark. Oh, sorry about that. In this case, I was to get lower notes. I was shifting the melody to the bass string for some of the notes. A more sophisticated style is to play floating harmonies behind the melody line or full chords. You can do things like this. Is a style that was sort of popular in some of the early Joni Mitchell recordings, where she played also. Sure, she was floating a harmony note behind the melody lines. You do things like. You can also play full chords, like. Some people, you can play fingerstyle, where you're playing different notes with different strings with different fingers. I'll attempt a bit of an Irish harp tune called Shebang Shamor. Get my fingers loosened up here. Sloppily done, it was unrehearsed, but I might try just a verse of a song to show how you can float I'm not the greatest singer, but to float harmonies behind a song line. Where you, what I can sing well here. At the moon I see over there in the west, o'er a headlight gleam, see an old express. I know she's gone. Now what do I say? And it won't be long before I make my mind up and go away. That was definitely unrehearsed. I have not been an active public performer for quite a few years. In the 60s and 70s, I was a minor coffee house performer, but I have not been a public performer for quite a few years.
Well, you've done wonderful for us.
I'm a sort of a half-assed musician,
Yeah.
but it's a hobby.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I can still do comparatively well. I wish I could cave as well as I could play.
Perfect.